Well, hello and welcome. I'm going to bring you along with me as I work on cutting the mat board and framing this piece. I call it Ranch Hand, and it was juried into the Fall 2023 Watercolor Society of Oregon's Watercolor Show. So I'm really excited to frame this up and bring you along. So I got some clear acrylic cut to size, and then I bought some of these frame bars, and I'm going to show you how I put them together. So I'm just going through to make sure the acrylic's cut to the correct size for the frames, and it was, and now I'm putting all my pieces together to make sure it all fits. So I have the clear acrylic, my painting, my mat board, and then foam cord board for the back. And it all fits inside the rabbet of the frame. And so I'm now just cutting down all the pieces that I need. I always make sure that I have a clean X-Acto blade, so that clean cuts, those are very important. Makes things so much easier. And then making sure that your pieces cut are square, so they're not wonky. That's not easy to cut mat board when you do the interior cut. So cutting all the pieces, and I do have an extra piece of foam cord board below everything as I cut, so I am not cutting my table. Don't cut your table, not recommended. So carefully measuring everything, all the little measure marks, and then connecting those lines and cutting them. Clean blades, once again, very important. Protecting your table, never overlook that, because then you'll be sad. So when I cut, I have the ruler to the side that is what I'm preserving. And so the right hand side, if I accidentally veer off my path, I don't ruin what I'm cutting. I'm making sure that it cuts all the way through. If it doesn't, I cut again. Sometimes it's like 3 or 4 passes with this blade before it's fully cut through. So now it's cut, it's happy. Doing some other final cuts. Make sure to hold your ruler really steady so that, it's all happy and everything, and straight lines, super important. So the process I'm using to figure out, how wide to cut my mat board, I don't use math. You'll see. So I have on your right-hand side, my left, as I'm cutting this. I'm not cutting it yet. I'm measuring. So this is a mat board device that was given to me. I have no idea how old it is. I've been cutting my own mat board for, I want to say, at least 10 years now. So it has these different little notches, and you can move them around. It coincides with actual measurements, but I go through and you'll see that I have that bar down, and then I take that extra piece of mat board that I cut and just kind of measure it and look and see, is that the right size of window? Nope, that's too much. I need to make the mat board size a little bit different. And you see I have my little laptop out there. That way I can make sure the lines, the crop lines up with the composition and crop that I submitted for this show. In the prospectus, you read it. It's really important. And you need to make sure that your image that you send to be juried into the show, it matches your final piece. So I'm making sure that it matches all along the edges, and you know what? This one fits. This one is just right, these measurements. So I keep the bar in place, and I'm just going to draw a pencil line all the way along it. So here's my pencil line all the way along. I'm going to keep the bar in place. I'm going to take the mat board out and switch it around. And it's really important to note that the side I'm drawing on is the back side of the mat board. You do not draw on the front side of the mat board, so the mat board that you see when your piece is framed and done. So time to measure the other side. So I'm keeping it at the same measurements as I did the long side. So this is the short side. And I'm going to take that mat board again and kind of measure it out and be like, okay, look at that. Consult my laptop with the image that I submitted to make sure the crop is correct. Ideally it is, because your piece can get disqualified if it's not correct. And you know what? This is correct, but I will double check everything before I begin cutting. So now I'm drawing the lines again, and I actually kind of regret drawing my lines not all the way to the edges, because you'll see it'll be a little hard for me to double check, but I make it work. So now it's time to double check. Gonna grab my painting, put it down, and I'm just gonna use like the same process as I did with measuring it, but a little differently. So I'm not using math. So I take a little extra long pieces of the foam core board that I cut away and the mat board that I cut away to make the correct size for this piece, and I'm putting it down along the lines. And I can't quite see the lines, but I make it work. So I'm gonna check the top and the bottom to make sure the crop, the composition, it matches up with the image I submitted. And you know what? This is pretty spot on. So I'm happy with that. So now it's time to measure the long edges. So I'm just going to take the bar off of my device and put it down and line it along the pencil lines that I made to make sure it's correct, because I like to paint my paintings a little bit bigger than what is submitted. So I'm making sure that all the lines line up, the negative space is correct. You can still see the certain parts of the composition, because that can make a big difference if you cut something out. And you can get disqualified. So lining it all up and it matches. So you know what? I can start cutting the mat. So I have a handheld device you'll see in just a moment. And it's a little finicky, but once you get the hang of it, it works. And cutting by hand, honestly, is a lot more affordable than having somebody professionally cut it with like a computerized system. So I'm just doing all the cuts nice and easy. Take it nice and slow. Make sure the blade is fresh almost every time, because there's nothing worse than dragging that along and the blade is dull and it rips your mat board on the front side and you have to start all over again. And it can get kind of expensive when you do bigger pieces, because you need to go buy a new sheet, drive all the way up and buy a new sheet. So now I'm just kind of figuring out where I want to sign my painting, because I didn't want to sign it before I framed it, so that I don't accidentally cut off my signature, because that can happen. So I'm just signing it, and now it's time to mount it to the back. So I'm just getting some of my acid-free tape. It's an artist tape. Acid-free is really important. That way it can help make sure your painting stays archival. And so I'm just kind of sticking it on the back and making sure that, the painting is where I want it within the mat board. And it can shift, and it does shift. So I kind of go through this little process. I'm just pushing it down, looking at it, pushing the tape down a little bit more, moving it around. And now I'm going to look, and you know what? It's not lined up right. So I need to adjust it. So I'm going to unstick that tape and then kind of smidge over the mat board a little bit so that it lines up properly according to the image that I submitted to be juried into this show. So the method I use to tape down paintings, it's called a hinge method. And I actually learned this in school. I think I learned it when I was in community college. And so I want to make sure the tape is stuck down really good. So I kind of burnish it with my thumbnail, just really like pushing that tape into all the crevices of the paper. And it's a hinge method because I don't tape down the entire edge. So I have 2 little pieces of tape that goes up and down, so they're vertical, and I do pieces of tape on the mat board overlapping the vertical pieces, so 2 horizontal. And I actually add 2 more horizontal pieces overlapping the vertical pieces. So it's not quite a T hinge. If I didn't put those second pieces of vertical tape, it'd be like a T hinge. I kind of do it this way to make sure it's extra secure. And that way, the paper can kind of change sizes. They can kind of get they can expand and shrink depending on the humidity and the temperature, and that way the paper is free to do that. So now it's time to put together the rest of the framework. I have these metal frame pieces. You can buy them online. I'll leave some links in the description. And you just buy, so this one was a 22 by 30 plexiglass. So I just bought one 22 and one size 30, and they come in sets of 2, and they have everything you need to put together. So now it's time to take off the protective sheet on the clear acrylic. I'm doing really carefully to make sure there's no scratches. You can kind of see that blue part has a little line. I was worried that it was like a deep scratch, and it wasn't, so that's really good. You have to be really careful because the static electricity is like crazy with these things. So I make sure that I have clean clothes on. There's no dog hair hanging around. I have my hair pulled back because, my hair would stick to it too. And I immediately put down the matted piece. And I have a foam cord behind it as well because that's how I'm going to frame it. And now I can pull off the top piece of the protective blue film. And as I do this, I do it nice and slow. And as I see little things stuck between the plexiglass and the mat board, I pause and I remove it as best as possible. It's almost impossible to have an immaculate framing job at home, but I do the best I can because that is the best I can do. And so you'll see as I'm doing this, I'm like, oh, there's another little thing. I also found little flecks of blue, this protective blue, kind of hanging on to the plexiglass. They do cut these sheets to size. I live near the Portland, Oregon area, and I go to a place called Tap Plastics, and you can have custom cut clear acrylic or plexiglass cut to size. You can choose the thickness and talk to them, say, hey, I'm going to frame a piece and it's going to be metal bars. And the guy I talked to, he really understood what I was talking about, and he made sure to find a piece of plexi that was least likely to have any scratches in it. I mean, it's kind of an imperfect process when you order from a big supplier or something like that. You can order through art galleries, but it's a little bit more expensive. And I do things myself as much as possible to keep down the costs. You want to make sure not to scratch your frame or your plexiglass in the process of this. It's really important. So I'm putting together the little corner pieces. And so I have 3 of the bars put together, and the plexi, the mat board, the foam cord, the painting are inside it. So now I'm going to top it off along the long piece, and I'm just putting the little corner pieces in. They work with a little screw adjustment type thing, and so you tighten the screw and it tightens and holds itself in place. And the device I'm using is something I actually made, and I use it for all my framing needs. So time to get everything into place. Make sure the plexiglass lines up inside the rabbet of the frame, so that's like the space where everything fits. There will be some wiggle room between the back side, and so there's these little metal, they're like, I don't know what I don't know the word they are, but they're like springs. And so I space them out near every corner, and then along the long side, I put one in the middle. And there's usually enough to do all of this with what comes with your set. You could probably buy them separately, but I always find there's enough. And so put them in. And also I make sure those little ring things for the framing wire are in the right place, as in like towards the top of the painting, but about 5 inches down from the top or more, depending on the size of the painting. So when I do the framing wire, I make sure that it's taut. I go around the little ring thing and set it so that it could hang like that, but I also do a whole bunch of wraps around the main part. It's really hard for me to film. I bet there's some pretty good videos out there about this, or you just figure it out and do what works best for you as long as things are secure. So going through and doing all the wraps to make sure it's nice and secure and safe. I do this for both sides. And you'll see that I added some tape to the little ring thing that holds the wire so it doesn't slide. Sometimes they want to slide inside the frame, which is not good. So I tape it down so that it's secure and doesn't wiggle around or anything like that. But sometimes it does stay where you put it. So I want to thank you for coming along with me as I work on framing this piece. I do not have a little video of it all framed up because I was just so excited to put it in the show and I forgot that part. So here I am with my painting. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you want to see more content about watercolor painting and such, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. Well, thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. I think that's enough, right?